I want to ask you a little more about this group CARE. What do you know about CARE?
Well, the CARE is the Council on American Islamic Relations, and as I describe in the book, it really is an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, the name of the book, The Grand Jihad, and the use of the word sabotage in the title, I wasn't sort of, brainstorming it like a crazy man in my attic one day, and all of a sudden that title hit me like a bolt from the blue. That's actually drawn from a 1991 Muslim Brotherhood memorandum, which talks about the Muslim Brotherhood's strategic plan for destroying Western civilization from within. And the word sabotage is their word for how they intend, much like the left, to bore into our society, to bore into our institutions, to hollow them out, and basically to legitimize, regularize, and spread Sharia law. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood has been doing here in the United States since the 1960s. And probably the best refinement that they've made in their approach was the establishment of CARE, which was done in around 1994. And the whole idea was, at that point in time, most of the activist Muslim organizations that were tied to the Muslim Brotherhood were well known to be supporters of Hamas, which was a terrorist organization and which was formally found to be a terrorist organization under U.S. government law in the mid-1990s. So the idea was that they needed this other organization that would be politically savvy, media savvy, headquartered in Washington, and would carry itself as a civil rights organization rather than a religious activist organization. And it was from that wellspring of thought that CARE sprung. And I believe history shows that it was really a genius stroke on their part, because CARE was instantly accepted by our academic elites, media elites, and our political leadership as a civil rights organization, even as it spent years really being an apologist for Islamist activists, Islamist terrorists, and even as it campaigned over many years to undermine every sensible defense measure that the United States tried to install in order to protect ourselves from the terrorist threat.
And yet CARE has access to the highest levels of our government, some of the most sensitive agencies that we have, right?
It not only has had that access, Mark, it continues to have access, even though in the most important terrorism financing case that the U.S. government has ever done, the Holy Land Foundation case, which was about financing basically for Hamas, and millions of dollars that were sent, laundered through ostensibly charitable organizations to Hamas. CARE, in addition to a number of the other Islamist organizations like the Islamic Society of North America, the Muslim American Society, and the Muslim Brotherhood itself, CARE was quite rightly labeled by the Justice Department as an unindicted co-conspirator, and I believe proven to be one at that trial.
Mm-hmm. And yet, I still see their spokesman, I still hear their spokesman, and the people that put them on their TV and radio programs never explain what this organization is or what this organization's all about. You're exactly right. It's treated as if it's the NAACP.
No, we've even had the Department of Homeland Security actually post CARE press releases verbatim, in which on your U.S. government websites, which all of us taxpayers pay for, CARE basically carries itself as the largest civil rights organization or Islamic civil rights organization in the United States. I would argue that it's anything but a civil rights organization.
Andy, I had mentioned to you jihad. I want to get into your point about how Islamists use politics rather than participate in it. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, Mark, after all these years of facing jihadist attacks, there's very little understanding in our country about what jihad actually is. Some people think it's only a military struggle. Others say that it's only this Oprah-fied, internal struggle to become a better person. What I think Americans need to understand is that jihad is the manner in which Muslims are bound to spread Sharia law. Everything in Islam is about the installation and spreading of Sharia, because Sharia, the Muslim legal code, is deemed to be the necessary precondition for Islamicizing a society. And when I say that Islamists use politics rather than participate in politics, they see it as another way of waging jihad, another way of carrying out what they see as a divine mission, ultimately to establish Sharia law, to legitimize it, to plant the idea, particularly in Western societies, that that maybe we should now start using Sharia in our financial transaction, in our inheritance law, in our domestic relations law. The next thing you know, you've legitimized it, and they are way ahead in what their ultimate mission is, which is not only to establish its legitimacy, but to spread its influence.
And we see this in places like France and Australia and England. As you point out, there are these Islamic enclaves that are developing, where there's indoctrination, where there's the pursuit of Sharia law. Explain that too.
Yeah, the strategy is called in many circles, I think this is an apt title for it, voluntary apartheid. And the idea is that Muslims, and this is really Muslim Brotherhood 101. But the idea is that Muslims should inhabit places that are not Muslim countries, with the idea of getting a sort of a toehold, which becomes a foothold, which becomes a wide berth, which ultimately spreads. And the idea is that if they make it lawless enough and violent enough, as it has been in some places throughout France and England, for example, you have these no-go zones where the police have basically ceded sovereignty to the Islamic authorities in these local areas. And it may be England, it may say that it's France, but in those precincts, in those enclaves, the law is Sharia, not the law of England or the law of France.
Now, we don't have a lot of time left in this segment. Are there communities like that developing like this in the United States? Yeah,
there certainly are, and they're not as widespread as they are in England now. The strategy in the United States has really been to take advantage of what appears to be our anxiousness to legitimize aspects of Sharia in our legal code, which is really a frightening development.
The last segment, I wanted you to underscore something, that you're saying that this is kind of a mainstream approach, or more mainstream than people think. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Mark, the dangerous thing is that we've deluded ourselves over the years, because we're so focused on terrorism, into thinking that anyone who's not blowing up, any Muslim activist, any Islamist who is not blowing up a building this minute must be a moderate. And what people, I think, need to understand is that between the Islamist terrorists and the other Islamist activists, what they disagree about is methodology. And there is a pretty healthy debate in that community about whether terrorism has actually almost outlived its usefulness at this point, because Islamists are making so much progress marching through our institutions without it, that it's almost counterproductive. They worry that the blowback from a terrorist attack is such that it actually undermines the progress they're making without it. But what people need to understand, I think, is that there's nothing moderate about wanting to install Sharia law and undermine the American constitutional system, which is what a lot of these folks want to do. That's probably the height of the immoderate, and we make a big mistake allowing these people to sort of travel under the label of moderate. They have disagreements about approach with the terrorists, but what I think people really need to understand is, as far as the goal line is concerned, these folks are all in agreement that what they want to see happen is Sharia law installed and American constitutional democracy, individual liberty eventually undermined and disappeared.
Folks, this is a great book. There's a lot more in this book than we have time to discuss, Andy, obviously.